Isaiah 66 concludes the book, delivering a vision of God's authority, the execution of judgment, and a restoration of Israel that spans from the ancient world to the distant future. The immediate historical setting finds Israel returning from the Babylonian captivity in the 6th century BC. As they attempt to rebuild the temple and reestablish worship, the prophet identifies internal corruption and religious practices that have become mere outward rituals. To understand how these warnings function, we look to the framework of prophetic typology. This is the principle of dual fulfillment, where Isaiah's visions address his immediate history while simultaneously establishing a pattern for later geopolitical events. In verses 5 through 9, we see this pattern move through a specific chronological sequence, beginning with a division among the people, moving through a period of national destruction, and ending in an unprecedented rebirth. By tracking the specific language Isaiah uses, we can see how the text maps God's plan across centuries, from the Roman siege of Jerusalem to the modern re-emergence of the Jewish state. We begin with the state of the nation prior to its judgment and subsequent restoration. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 5 states, "Hear the word of the Lord, ye that tremble at his word. Your brethren that hated you, that cast you out for my name's sake, said, Let the Lord be glorified. But he shall appear to your joy, and they shall be ashamed." The prophet addresses those who tremble at his word, a subset of believers who maintain a strict reverence for God's commands, despite being marginalized by the majority. While this initially applied to the tensions of the post-exilic period, scholars like Louth and Vitringa note its precise alignment with the 1st century. During this time, early followers of Christ were systematically cast out of synagogues and persecuted by their own brethren. The text highlights our recurring religious hypocrisy. Those doing the casting out claimed to be honoring God, declaring, "Let the Lord be glorified," even as they rejected the very people God favored. Isaiah ends the verse with a promise of role reversal. The Lord will appear to the joy of the persecuted, while the mockers will face the shame of public judgment. This judgment is described as an active intervention by God against his adversaries. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 6 states, "A voice of noise from the city, a voice from the temple, a voice of the Lord that rendereth recompense to his enemies." Isaiah identifies two specific locations for this commotion, the city of Jerusalem and its temple. He describes this as a thundering recompense, or a divine payment for the corruption mentioned in the previous verses. This found a literal fulfillment in 70 AD. Following years of internal strife and rebellion, the Roman army executed a total destruction of the city and the Second Temple. The Arch of Titus serves as a primary historical record of this event, depicting Roman soldiers carrying off the sacred menorah as spoils of war, signaling the end of the temple services. The ancient Jewish state was effectively dismantled here, its people scattered among the nations for nearly 2 millennia. This creates the geopolitical vacuum that makes the next 3 verses so distinct from natural history. Following this imagery of noise and destruction, the prophet describes a sudden, miraculous shift toward restoration. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 7 states, "Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child." The verse presents a biological paradox, a birth that occurs before the onset of labor pains. In a prophetic sense, this indicates a restoration that occurs without the expected period of agonizing struggle. It suggests an event brought about by divine decree rather than prolonged human effort. This metaphor establishes that when God decides to restore Zion, the process will be swift and supernatural, bypassing the typical cycles of history. The next verse expands on the sheer scale of this sudden event. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 8 states, "Who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day? Or shall a nation be born at once? For as soon as Sion travailed, she brought forth her children." Isaiah asks, who hath heard such a thing? Because what he is seeing has no precedent. He is witnessing the instantaneous emergence of an entire nation. While partially reflected in the 538 BC return from Babylon, the language of being born in one day points toward a more literal fulfillment. In the aftermath of World War II, the scattered Jewish people saw their sovereign statehood restored through a single declaration on May 14, 1948. On that afternoon, the transition from a British mandate to an independent nation occurred in a matter of hours, fulfilling the one-day imagery of the prophecy through a measurable political act. Isaiah describes Zion bringing forth her children, a reference to the massive influx of people returning from the nations. Following the horrors of the 1940s, thousands of survivors arrived by ship, populating the new state almost overnight. This rapid influx from the diaspora created a nation composed of people who, until that moment, had been living in exile across Europe, Africa, and Asia. In this sequence, the theological paradox of a birth without labor became a geopolitical reality. A scattered people were consolidated into a sovereign nation in a single day. The section concludes with an assurance regarding God's commitment to this work. Isaiah chapter 66, verse 9 states, "Shall I bring to the birth and not cause to bring forth, saith the Lord? Shall I cause to bring forth and shut the womb, saith thy God?" The prophet uses the metaphor of childbirth to argue that God does not initiate a process only to leave it incomplete. The logic presented is one of consistency. If God has overseen the birth of the nation, he will ensure its continued growth and the ongoing gathering of its people. Just as the political restoration was brought to pass through the events of the 20th century, this verse indicates that the spiritual restoration of Zion will follow the same divine pattern to its conclusion. This continuity across millennia demonstrates that the fulfillment of the prophecy is tied to the reliability of the speaker. This concludes our overview.